What's going on, everybody? Welcome to Survivor Season 50 History Lessons, where we talk about each player competing on Season 50 of Survivor. We talk about their history on the island and even sometimes their history off the island. I am your host, Louis Colangelo. For those of you who don't know me, I am the host, or one of the two hosts, of the Reality Gurus podcast. Maybe you saw me on TikTok, whatever. Thank you so much for being here. I'm pretty much a nothing in the Survivor space, to be completely honest. At my core, I am just a really big fan. I was a baby when Borneo came out. My family watched every single episode. Kind of began to understand what was happening around, I'd say, like Cook Islands or so. And I've since gone back and watched every single episode in the history of the show as an adult. So this podcast, the Reality Gurus podcast, it was started when we were in college. For the new people, it's usually like a weekly podcast where myself and my buddy Dave, we talk about this week's Survivor episode, pretty much. First season we ever did was David versus Goliath, so lucky us there. And then the space kind of died down after Winners of War and COVID and everything. So this podcast for a while has existed solely just for me and my friend to have an appointment to talk to each other is pretty much it. The numbers have gone down. I guess I didn't really need to say that, but they have. But the most popular podcasts I've ever done were the Survivor Season 40 preview rankings, whatever you want to call them. Episodes are about 5 or 6 that I did where we ranked everybody every which way. We gave predictions. So I decided I'm going to do it right for Survivor 50. So like I said, this will be a series where we talk about each player returning for Survivor 50, and then it's going to culminate in me ranking the Survivor 50 castaways in all facets of the game, similar to how I did on Season 40, and then eventually me giving official predictions for the season, probably right before the season comes out. So today is the first episode of the series, which means we're going to be talking about the earliest Season 50 castaway to debut. And to do this, we have to journey all the way back to the summer of 2000 and the jungles of Borneo. So before we get into Jenna, I want to talk a little bit about Survivor Borneo in general. So my hope in this series is kind of just infuse some of my own Survivor history into the series, but also just Survivor history in general into the series. Obviously, I don't have much here. I was 2 years old when Survivor Borneo came out. But like I said, my parents were day one fans. Growing up, never missed an episode. And I've always kind of been into like these elimination-based competitions, right? I think it's just the drama of just not being the one person to be gone in that round. So like March Madness, WWE Survivor Series, like Big Brother, like Survivor might be my like impetus for my interest in all of those things. So Survivor Borneo and a few of the earlier seasons, I was too young to kind of know in the moment what was going on, or like to be in the moment, I guess is more what I'm trying to say. And like I said, I haven't seen every episode of the show, but like I'm talking about being a coherent adult, being able to take in, kind of the media landscape around what really was one of the biggest shows in television history, at least one of the biggest premieres in season ones in television history. And I just wasn't able to do that for Survivor Borneo, but obviously I've got some really solid secondhand information there, and obviously I've seen the show. So, quick tangent, but I was listening to this guy Jeff Pearlman, who is a sports writer, formerly wrote for Sports Illustrated, and he's got a podcast, the Press Box Chronicles, I think it's called. And he kind of dives into like the history of different things, and like obviously he's a journalist, I'm not, and so I'm kind of trying to take a little bit of that slant of like a history lesson, but kind of like just trying to be fun with it, and so I thought maybe I would give a little bit of the Survivor backstory for people who aren't familiar. I know a lot of people are. Um, but yeah, I just kind of want to go quick tangent because like a lot of Survivor fans know that Survivor is actually based off of a Swedish reality show called Expedition Robinson. And it actually goes a little bit deeper in that. So before there was Jeff Probst and Matt Van Wagenen and even Mark Burnett, there was a guy by the name of Charlie Parsons. And you might have heard of Charlie Parsons, or at least know the name. You've probably seen it in the credits of Survivor for the past 25 years. So, 1994, Charlie Parsons, he has the idea for Survivor, and he's calling it Castaway. And so he and Bob Geldof, they form a production company called Planet 24 to create the show. And they pitch it to the BBC. Charlie Parsons is British, if you didn't know that. And the BBC actually passes on Castaway. So I'm sure it was rough around the edges, but yes, in concept, the BBC did pass on Survivor. So Charlie Parsons, he kind of toils around for a few years, and he's able to partner with Strix Television in Sweden. Had to look that one up. And through this TV deal, they eventually develop Expedition Robinson in 1997. And Expedition Robinson, you can find clips of it on YouTube. I've watched a couple of them before. Never close to a full season, probably not even a full episode. But it's very similar to Survivor. You vote people out once an episode. There are tribes, there's challenges, there's a merge, there's a jury. The jury votes on the winner. And Expedition Robinson is kind of, it's very popular very early, and they quickly make plans for international spin-offs of Expedition Robinson. So Charlie Parsons partners with a guy named Mark Burnett, and these two and Probst are kind of like the big three of Survivor history. So Mark Burnett, he is supposed to be the guy who is going to bring Expedition Robinson to the States. He's going to be kind of the creator of the American version of Expedition Robinson. And if you know anything, God, my nose, allergy season's rough, guys. But if you know anything about Mark Burnett, he had a show before Survivor called the Eco Challenge that ran for 10 seasons from 1995 to 2002. And so the Eco Challenge, it was kind of like an extreme version of the Amazing Race. I know it was like a 24-hour kind of continuous deal, and I'm not sure how long the whole race was. I think the seasons were, I think it was like just a special that they would air, and to be like an hour and a half long for like the whole thing. I'm not quite sure on that. I honestly haven't done enough Eco Challenge research, I must say. But one thing about Mark Burnett is he loves to put people in a kind of pressure cooker situation, and the reaction of everyday people in those environments, that's what he and then eventually America found fascinating, right? And so he wants to take kind of the best aspects of the Eco Challenge, and he wants to put them on the Expedition Robinson format, combine them, and he eventually packages this as Survivor. And on November 24th, 1999, Mark Burnett successfully pitches the show Survivor to Les Moonves, and he picks up Survivor through CBS, obviously, and that's kind of the impetus. I mean, I know, so it's pitched in November of 1999. I know they start filming in March of 2000, and they're airing in, I believe, May 31st is the premiere of Survivor Borneo. So this is like from the green light to the premiere airing is 6 months. And if you think about that now in TV, I mean, we're getting 10 episode seasons of scripted shows that take 2 years to develop. And so the turnaround, especially this time in like TV history, the turnaround is crazy. I mean, we were getting 26 episodes of Lost once a year. You know, it's crazy. So, but anyway, back to Survivor Borneo a little bit. So, the first season of Survivor filmed directly off the coast of the island of Borneo. It's a small island called Pulau Tiga, or I think just Tiga Island, and Pulau Tiga is the Malaysian way to say it. Um, but anyway, it's in the Sabah region of Malaysia. So obviously, this is a lot to say. It is regarded in survivor history as simply Survivor Borneo, and that's how I refer to it pretty much. But it's nice to kind of see the background just behind, or besides just the header um, that you see for each season and just the tagline there. So there are 16 castaways, Survivor Borneo, divided into two tribes of 8. So we've got the Tagi tribe, and this is the dominant force of the season. They are credited with being the quote unquote first alliance, although I don't know if it's technically true. We'll get into that in a second. But this is your Richard Hatch, Kelly Wigglesworth, Rudy Bosch, Sue Hawk, not in the alliance necessarily, but Dr. Sean Kniff. These are the big names of the Tagi tribe. And then on the flip side, we've got the Pagong tribe. And I think the merged 5 are pretty well known in survivor history. So you got Gretchen Cordy. She is probably the real first shocker vote, blindside, if you will, right, in survivor history. I guess maybe Sonia or whoever, didn't know that they were getting voted out, but I think this is the first where there were players that were absolutely floored by what just happened. So you've got Gretchen. You got Greg Bowie, who was apparently in the running for Survivor Season 50 as well. Jervis Peterson, who returns to be a finalist on Survivor Blood versus Water. You got Colleen Haskell, and of course, the subject of this video, Jenna Lewis. And now going by Jenna Lewis-Dougherty, I believe is, I'm not sure exactly how you pronounce it, but and Jenna is actually the youngest contestant on Survivor Borneo. So there was a small stretch of time where Jenna is the youngest player to ever play the game of Survivor. So the dynamics on Survivor Borneo, right? Tagi and Pagong. It's two very different dynamics and style of play. So Jenna's tribe, the Pagong tribe, it's really ruled by the younger players. You got a guy, BB Anderson, RIP, by the way. He kind of takes over as the leader immediately. And he's like a no-nonsense 64-year-old from Mission Hills, Kansas. And he really wants to instill this hard work ethic. He wants to be the leader and he wants everybody to work hard. And even when other people are not working hard, he does this thing where he himself is just pushing logs around and shit just for the hell of it. He will not stop working. And typically that's something that would endear you to your tribe, especially in these early days. But Pagong they're so laid back and they have such this kind of laissez-faire attitude that they're like, this is bullshit. This guy, what does he think he's doing by he just won't stop working. BB, just put the fucking sticks down for 5 seconds, chill out, come to get to know us as people. And he doesn't really do that. And BB, he is the first person voted out of the Pagong tribe, the second person voted out overall. And so once BB is gone, Gretchen kind of becomes the de facto leader of this tribe. And, although they had some structure to their camp life at this point, they were really far behind in terms of how to be successful in the elimination phase of the game. So the flip side of that is the Tagi Beach, right? They start pretty early on with the strategizing. And the first real alliance in Survivor history is actually the Tagi women. So it is Sue and Kelly, but also Stacy Stillman and Sonia Christopher, who Sonia eventually becomes the first person voted out. And it's the first flip in Survivor history, really, is actually at the first tribal council, where Richard, not a very winner thing to do, but Richard, he has a great relationship with Sonia. He knows she's getting votes. He doesn't vote for her. He kind of abstains from this vote and kind of throws his vote away. And so there's 7 votes that really matter. And we get 3 votes for Rudy, which are from Kelly, Stacy, and Sonia. And we've got 3 votes for Sonia, which are from the rest of the guys other than Rich. And Sue actually goes back on this alliance. She decides that Sonia is actually the weakest link, not length. And she votes Sonia out of the game. And there is some controversy around this this portion of the Tagi tribe phase. I don't know if it's this vote or when Stacy is voted out. I think it's when Stacy's voted out. But Stacy essentially accuses production of trying to sway Castaways towards keeping Rudy, because I think they know that he is lightning in a bottle as far as sound bites. It wasn't really a soundbite era, but they just know that this guy is going to be great TV. And she argues that they were trying to do everything they could to keep Rudy in the game. Could be true, could not be true. I think I generally doubt this. I think Rich was really the most valuable person around camp, and that really mattered at this point in Survivor history. And so I think that just Sue started to gravitate towards, okay, I think, Rudy, he's old, but he does work hard. There's structure there. Rich is basically the food source. And I think people just saw the writing on the wall of what needed to happen to survive out there. And that was a much bigger deal at this point. So I'm going to chalk that up to sour grapes for Stacey Stillman. But I bet Stacey Stillman is probably the first person in Survivor history to be on the blacklist for returning. I don't know that they were even considering having people return. They were just worried about, the show being a hit in the first place. But yeah, Stacey Stillman, pretty much the first ruckus causer, I would say, in Survivor history, outside of the game. So as I said, it's about at this point, pretty early on in the game, that Tagi forms the first quote-unquote real alliance in Survivor history. And it's a crazy butterfly effect, I think, to kind of tie Jenna into this, because the tribe breakdowns, right? So Colleen is 23, but the 2 youngest players are both 2 22-year-old women. One is Jenna Lewis, as I said, and the other is Kelly Wigglesworth. And I think it's an interesting exercise to think what would have happened if Wigglesworth and Jenna are flipped. What if they start on opposite tribes? I think Jenna really is a contender for the win because she's clearly the most strategic, or at least the most aggressive player from Pagong by the end of this. And she's definitely the most headstrong. And I think that, we see her on All-Stars play from within an alliance. She gets it. And I think if you swap Jenna and Kelly, I think you assume Jenna fits into the Tagi 4 similarly to how Kelly did. And I think she could be like the most powerful player in the game, because if she goes to the Final 4 with the Tagi 4, I think she probably does a similar thing that she does on All-Stars. She probably would side with Rich and Rudy and vote out Sue, I would believe. And I think, like Kelly, she probably wins that final immunity challenge and votes off Rudy. And I think Rich still beats her, but I don't think it's a sure thing. And I could also see a situation like, what if Jenna Lewis is the first person to flip in Survivor history, right? Because she goes to the merge with the Tagi 4, and I could see her flipping to Pagong because this is the group that she identifies more with, right? It is the younger people, and I think if they can get Greg to think a little bit strategically, I never quite liked Greg as much as everybody else because I think there is this idea that Greg had this grand plan going on inside of his head, and he was putting on this really goofy front, which I do think is true to an extent, but I think the idea that he had this kind of master plan probably isn't true. But I think if you get him thinking strategically, I think a group of him and Jenna, Kelly, Jervis, and Colleen, and maybe even Gretchen before it's too late, I guess Gretchen would go first. They could bounce back from that Gretchen elimination and take control. And I'm actually not sure if Jenna makes it as far in this situation, but because people were so into like sticking to tribal lines early on. Like Jenna's reward for flipping the game might just be fifth place. You don't know that, but I think like Jenna gets pretty far in this scenario, and she probably replaces Rich as like the pioneer of the game in this example. Obviously, I'm giving her a lot of credit for a hypothetical that is kind of far removed from anything we really ever saw her do, but I think it's an interesting kind of path to look down. So I know we're kind of speed running Borneo here, but we are a decent bit into this recording. So let's talk about Jenna's demise, right? So it's pretty simple in Borneo, right? Gretchen is voted out at the merge. She is the merge boot. We come in with five Tagis and five Pagongs. Sean, not really with the Tagis, but he is a Tagi. He's not with the Tagi 4, I should say. Um, and so Pagong, really the whole deal is they're not playing very strategically. Tagi is. Tagi takes out their leader. Um, and it's quite shocking, honestly, at the final nine to see Pagan confessionals about how they still don't really think that there's an alliance. Um, there are 10 votes at the final 10 tribal council. 6 people get 1 vote, and then there are 4 votes on Gretchen. It is maybe the most obvious thing in the universe that there are 4 people that are voting together. Um, but there are still people who are questioning it because it's actually kind of seen as ethically wrong to create alliances, right? People are really talking about, bringing something to the survival aspect of things, and you should be voted off if you're not contributing to that. And creating an alliance where someone valuable protects someone who is not valuable, that is ethically wrong, it was viewed as at this point. So people are still denying the alliance factor. Um, and this is also the vote where Dr. Sean develops the alphabet strategy. So, like I said, he's not explicitly part of the Tagi alliance. He pretty much has no direction on where to vote at this point. So, as simple as it sounds, Sean started at the beginning of the alphabet with Colleen at the merge, and he just voted for the next person alphabetically each week. And this strategy, as dumb as it is, really is it's a landmark moment in Survivor history because the way that the rest of Tagi manipulates Sean, it really leads to them being able to steamroll because they're 4 people out of 6. And they're really like, if people were to catch on, they have a couple votes to actually do something about this. But um, so Gretchen goes, like I said. Greg is the next person voted out at the final 9. And the Tagi group, they essentially end the season right here, where Sean is doing his alphabet strategy. Greg is next in the alphabet, and they say, hey, Greg isn't in the alliance. Let's just vote out Greg. Now we have 5 votes because Sean is technically voting with us because we're voting with him, right? And Jenna actually votes for Greg here too, which is kind of interesting. I think she said that she was just getting annoyed with him. So much for me saying that she was strategic, but Greg goes 6-3, and then Jenna's elimination is the final 8. So Jenna is next in Sean's alphabet strategy from G to J. And Tagi, they do the same thing. They all vote for Jenna. And Sean even says in his voting confessional, I don't think this is going to do anything. I don't think people are voting for you, Jenna, but you're next in the alphabet strategy. So, and this is also where Kelly, she kind of starts to break away from the Tagi 4. She votes for Sean, actually, not Jenna or Rich. And Rich is the other main target at this tribal council. So I think if Jenna survived this vote, I do think there's more of a chance of Kelly's breakaway from the alliance being fully realized. But Regardless, Jenna, she goes out 4-3-1. The college student from Franklin, New Hampshire, uh, she's gone. And so Jenna, her signature moment is, um, she has an interesting portion where the loved one what turns into the loved one visit is everyone gets a video from home, and if you win the reward challenge, you get to watch your video. Um, and so I believe Jeff announces before the challenge that Jenna didn't even get a video. Um, I don't know if her family just didn't get it in time or what, but Jenna doesn't have a video. Um, and so Greg wins the challenge, and there's actually this great bit where the video from Greg's sister, Rudy, thinks that they have like an incestuous relationship. Um, but Jenna's family physically didn't even send a video. And so there's this great scene where everyone is watching Greg's video with him, and Jenna is off. She's still like playing the challenge. It's like a bow and arrow target practice challenge, and it's just whoever's closest to the middle, they get their family video. And Jenna is constantly hitting the target closer than Greg did, to the bullseye. And it's kind of like that pickup basketball episode of The Office where Kevin's like not allowed to play, and then after the game ends, he's just shooting around and he's just like drilling shot after shot. That's kind of what's happening here. But uh, she's also part of Survivor history just for the phrase pagonging, right? And so I think everybody pretty much knows this at this point. But for those who don't know, um, a pagonging is when one tribe is voted out in succession, like the Pagong Five in the first 5 episodes after the merge in Survivor Borneo. So she's part of the lexicon there for sure. Um, and then Jenna, she's one of the 3 votes for Kelly to win at Final Tribal Council. So she's on the losing end of that one as well, where Rich wins 4-3. So obviously, I covered a lot of stuff that wasn't really Jenna related. And I think a lot of the big stories in Survivor Borneo were it was Rich, right? First of all, Rich, he had this interesting kind of cerebral approach to the game. There's obviously the Alliance, the Tagi 4, a lot of screen time was spent trying to get inside the minds of these people. Because, like I said, the Alliance, it was considered icky and kind of trying to understand, people's viewpoints on, all right, this is viewed as ethically wrong. You guys are doing it. We would love to hear you guys' take. And obviously, Rudy is a big character. Jervis is a big character at times. Greg is obviously a very interesting guy. And Pagong, it's kind of just like a mishmash of a bunch of people fighting for the last like 30% or so of the screen time. And to be honest, Jenna just isn't that big of a part of the edit, to be completely honest. And so after Survivor Borneo, like people got famous from Survivor, but no one really got like famous from Survivor. Like you can kind of scour the internet and find old Survivor players making just like the most random TV and movie appearances in like the early and mid 2000s. Like I think Jenna was in an Eminem music video, I think, with Kelly, is it Goldsmith or Goldschmidt from Africa? Yeah, they're like in an Eminem video. She was in a few movies. She did have the one, I guess it's a movie, that was particularly controversial where this was after Survivor All Stars actually, but she made a sex tape that she said was just for her and her, I think it was husband at the time, maybe boyfriend. And it was supposed to just be for them. And then somebody stole it and leaked it and was selling access to it online. And she was like speaking out majorly against this, and she was getting victimized. And then it came out later that she is the one who leaked it, and she was making like 70% of all of the profits were going to her. So there were definitely some money grabs going on for sure after Survivor Borneo. But hey, it's this was kind of the like reality TV era, like trying to maximize that 15 minutes. Like your name's kind of in the news cycle, do something to try to keep it in the news cycle. Um, but regardless, uh, so Jenna, she finishes eighth in Borneo. Again, not really a major character, but enter Survivor All Stars. And Survivor All Stars, it expanded the cast to 18 people. And the 9 women were, I'm going to read them off: Sue Hawk, Jenna Lewis, Tina Wesson, Alicia Calloway, Amber Burkich, Jerry Manthe, Kathy Vio, Xian Huang, and Jenna Maraska. And I believe Mark Burnett has said that pretty much his process for this was he wrote down 24 names and then he crossed out a couple to get to 18. He offered those 18 people. 16 of them said yes. The 2 no's being Elizabeth, then Filarski, now Elizabeth Hasselbeck, who was replaced by Amber. So a big butterfly effect there. And then the other one was Colleen Haskell. She pretty much she moved on from Survivor, didn't really want any part of it. And Jenna was her replacement. So there's obviously a couple misses, and I took note of a couple. And I think Kelly Wigglesworth is also a big miss. I think I don't think they wanted all of the Tagi 4, because in 3 tribes you're gonna have to put 2 of them. Like you're gonna either have to put Wigglesworth on a tribe with someone with history, or, which, I mean, they did this with the Australia people anyway. There was like 6 people from Australia. But regardless, they either put like Hatch and Rudy together, or I think Sue and Rudy would probably have been a relatively harmless pairing. But regardless, I see wanting to hold Wigglesworth out. Colleen obviously said no. Elizabeth said no. I think T-Bird would have been an interesting ad. I have always said Vesepia would be interesting. Helen Glover, too, I think was maybe, I don't know. I personally think Helen Glover is good TV. I know Jeff hates everybody who was in Heidi's Alliance on Thailand. And then Heidi Strobel, I know, said no, which, fun fact, Heidi Strobel, I'm a Phillies fan, and the Phillies won the World Series in 2008 when I was a kid. And the World Series MVP was Cole Hamels, who Heidi Strobel is actually married to. So, a little fun fact there. And then I think the other big one is Sandra said no. She, I think, got a parasite in Survivor Pearl Islands. And so she said no because she was still recovering from that. And so I think when I first watched All Stars, I was a bit surprised to see Jenna, because I pretty much was just rolling through a bunch of them. And I didn't really do any research about, the decision process for the cast. I did think it was interesting hearing Rob Cesternino talk about it on the Evolution of Strategy. He goes kind of deep into it a little bit. But I'm not quite as surprised to see Jenna. Like, the more I actually think about it, like, I think Colleen saying no, Jenna being her replacement, there was kind of like a bunch of people who said no on the women's side. And I think if you look at who the locks are, like, I would say Sue for sure. I think Tina, Jerry, Kathy, and I think Jenna Maraska. That's like, I would say 5 for sure. And then you got 4 more spots. Like, I think Colleen, Elizabeth, and Sandra saying no. I think I would find a way to get Vesepia on there. I think I'd find a way to get T-Bird on there. That's still 2 more slots. I'd probably replace Alicia and Amber, I think I would. Which, again, ripple effect with getting rid of Amber. But, and like I said, I think I'd put Helen on instead of Xian for a Thailand rep. But I get it. Xian had a big moment with the fake merge. So then that last spot, it's pretty much like, if Colleen's saying no, I think I'd put Jenna on, considering that I think Heidi also said no. So yeah, I get it with Jenna. So let's get into Survivor All Stars here. So Survivor All Stars was filmed in the Pearl Islands. It debuted November of 2003. And this is another one that I wasn't there for in the moment. I was 5 years old. I think All Stars both does and doesn't live up to the hype in many ways. I think the good aspects, the early episodes are really great. It feels like a really big deal to have all these people coming back. Um, the guessing game challenge is all time. I think seeing all the favorites from past seasons interact together is is really fun. Um, it's also the birth of Boston Rob, and I know he's a divisive character in the fan base, and obviously his real birth is in Marquesas, but this is really his coming out party, and he's at the top of the list of people you would think of that are synonymous synonymous with Survivor, and I think like him or not, like he really dominates this game. Um, and I think the last part is like there are jaw dropping eliminations pretty much every week. Like even if the vote is pretty straightforward, the person that's walking out the door, it's still a big deal. It's still like preseason, who you think of as contenders, it is just heavy hitter after heavy hitter. I mean, if you take out the quits, it goes Tina, then Rudy, Sesternino, Hatch, Colby, um, then Ethan, Jerry, and then spilling over to the merge, it's Lex and Kathy. So like pretty much everyone who you thought could win preseason was gone in the pre-merge or the early merge. Um, so I think like they really hit the ground running. It was big eliminations every week. Um, and then subsequently the bad parts. I mean the quits. I'm not quite sure why Jenna Maraska started the game. I know she has since said that it was a mistake to say yes. I think she absolutely deserved a spot, but I think she probably just should have stayed home if she knew she was going to quit. Um, and then obviously the stuff with Sue and Rich is bad, and it was handled really poorly on the show, especially by today's standards. Um, and that's just not something that you want to see come into the game at all. So obviously there was there were definitely some downers in there for sure. And I think the other big issue is like the post merge for how good the pre merge was. The post merge it was pretty much just lambs to the slaughter. Like the onion of Rob and Amber's alliance was pretty much just slowly unpeeled layer by layer each week. No one did anything about it, and it's kind of boring to be honest. I think All Stars is probably a below average season of Survivor. I guess depending on how you rate the new era, it might be hovering kind of close to the middle. But I think from one to Winners of War, it lives somewhere in the 20s. I think for most people. So let's finally shift the focus to Jenna's game specifically. Um, and I think All Stars, like I kind of alluded to, um, is really ruled by some of the quote unquote like smaller names. There's pretty much a crusade against winners, and Jenna is really the one person who starts this. I would say if there's one lasting impact of Jenna Lewis on this season, it is uh, kind of being the first person to target the winners and the big name players. Um, so just to backtrack a little bit, there's three tribes. There's Chapera, there's Mogo Mogo, and there's Saboga. So Jenna is on Saboga, along with Jerry Manthe, Tina Wesson, Ethan Zahn, Rudy Bosch, and Rupert Boneham. And so Saboga loses the first challenge, and it's a true nightmare. It's just someone's going from being an all star to being the first person voted out, and I imagine that's a pretty terrible feeling. But the Saboga dynamics, a pretty early alliance that's formed, is between Rupert and Rudy, and I think these are both kind of like the guys that take themselves pretty seriously. Rupert, obviously very strong, which Rudy is going to respect. And Rupert is kind of like a by the books good guy. He's kind of lawful good. So, of course, he's kind of seeking the approval of the elder statesman. Um, and so this alliance, it just kind of makes sense. And the tribe loses this first immunity challenge. And Jenna throws out the concept that they should vote a winner out because they've already had their moment. Jerry is pretty on board with this. And then um, the obvious counter to this is Ethan and Tina, the two winners. They're targeting Jenna in retaliation. And Ethan makes a good point where, if you take a winner to the end, you are essentially guaranteeing yourself a win. I don't know how true that would have been, but I do think that it's probably a good pitch to at least survive day one if you're Ethan. So it pretty much comes down to Rupert and Rudy being the swing votes. This alliance that I just talked about being formed, and Jenna does get 2 votes here from the winners, but ultimately her plan does go through, and Tina is the first player voted out of Survivor All Stars. And I think you can give a lot of credit to Jenna Lewis for this vote. It is her idea. She is the one who goes out on a limb and suggests this. And I think it is just a kind of a commentary on how far we've come as far as Survivor strategy, because being the first person to throw out a name and just pretty publicly saying your strategy when it's only there's one level to the strategy, which is I think we should vote out the winners. And that's pretty much all there is to it. You don't have a secret plan you're trying to get anybody with. That's just what it is. The fact that you can do that and not be punished for it, it would be unbecoming of modern Survivor, that's for sure. But regardless, it works for Jenna, and she survives. So the second elimination, Saboga, they win the reward, but they lose the immunity challenge again. And so this vote is between Ethan and Rudy. And so Ethan, he is the one remaining winner. Rudy, obviously, is very old. He's clearly the weakest link physically at this point. I think he even sustained an ankle injury at some point. I forget how that happened, but I know that he was dealing with a little bit of an injury. And so him and Rupert, they're voting for Ethan. Ethan's voting for Rudy. And Jenna and Jerry, they actually end up voting for Rudy. So they're going to leave Ethan in the game because they've lost 2 challenges at this point. I think that if this was the first vote, like if Rudy had gotten hurt at that point, I mean, we pretty much saw the debate between him and Tina going home. I think that losing both of the first 2 immunity challenges, maybe people will be like, shit, maybe we got to keep Ethan around a little bit. Because Ethan was kind of, it was pretty much like they had Ethan, Mogo had Colby, Shapira had Rob, and that was pretty much like each team's young athletic guy, and then each team had a big guy, and it was broken up pretty well. So not a ton happens for Jenna in the next 2 eliminations. Obviously, Jenna Maraska quitting the game is the 3rd elimination, if you want to call it that. And then Rob C getting voted out of Shapira. So just like that, the Amazon is swept right out of Survivor All Stars. I guess they're the first season eliminated fully. And it brings us to a pivotal challenge in Survivor history, which is the reward challenge at the final 14, where there are 14 players left in the game. And in this reward challenge, the team who comes in 3rd place is going to get dissolved. And Saboga comes in last place, and their 4 members are going to be split up in a schoolyard pick. And so Mogo, they win the challenge outright. They're first place. And their reward for that is they get to pick first in the schoolyard pick. So they're going to take Ethan, followed by Shapira taking Rupert. And then Mogo is going to come back and take Jerry. And Shapira takes Jenna Lewis last. And this is kind of a building theme for Jenna, right? She's the replacement for Colleen in the original cast. She's the last pick here. We saw her kind of in the early stages. Like, she can play this game, and I think it allows her to kind of slot in under the radar like pretty nicely. I don't know if that's a conscious decision for her or not, but it is the case. And another thing that happens around this time that I can't help but not address it, or I can't help but address it. There's obviously this controversy around Richard Hatch and Sue Hawk. So at the reward challenge, Richard is fully naked. He kind of, I shouldn't laugh, sorry. He kind of rubs up on Sue as they're passing each other. Um, and there's really no place for this in the game. We've seen Richard being naked, like both in Borneo and in the early stages of All Stars, just kind of around camp, like being naked all the time. Um, and for my taste, honestly, like that itself is a bit far. But like now he's touching someone while he's naked, and I mean, like Hatch is very interesting to me. I think like the blank canvas that was Survivor Borneo. I think it was very interesting to watch him kind of draw the blueprint for how to play Survivor in real time. And like I really did enjoy watching him play the game. Like as in that respect I am a fan. But it always bothers me a little bit when I talk about him because like this is the last thing he did on Survivor ever. Um and I think you have to separate the player from the person here. Is like the player Richard Hatch is an intriguing guy, very interesting. Um, but like the player, or sorry, but the person, like I know it's not malicious. I know he's gay and she's a woman. It doesn't matter. There's just there's just no way around the fact. It's just wrong, and that's all I'm going to say about that. But it is important to how the rest of the season starts to shake out, and so I did have to bring it up. Um, but yeah, obviously it's very wrong, and that really is the last we ever see of both Richard Hatch and Sue Hawk on Survivor. Um, but now that we get the fun stuff out of the way, let's talk about Jenna on the swapped tribe of Shapira, or not really the swap, on her new tribe of Shapira. So this is around the time that Jenna makes the biggest move that she will in the game, and it's you might say it's a little disrespectful for me to say that because the move is aligning with Rob and Amber, and you might say it's a little disrespectful, but as we dig into this, like, kind of is the biggest move that she makes the entire game. Um, so Shapira is kind of in shambles right now. Sue is in a really bad place mentally. She's about to quit the game at their next challenge. Rob and Alicia, I think they really didn't like each other at this point. They had a weird kind of loyalty, and I think Alicia liked Rob and Amber, and she really wanted to be in there. They liked Alicia in general, but there's at times that Alicia is just she gets to be too much. Um, and then I think Tom is a flip candidate based on his history with Ethan and Lex, who are now on the same tribe on the other side. You figure they're probably going to stick together, and you could be at risk of losing Tom at a merge. And so Rob is going to extend an olive branch here to his new tribe mates, Rupert and Jenna. And this is really Rob's plan B in case Shapira goes to shit. And it kind of slowly turns into his plan A. And so there's kind of two things at work here. One is Jenna slowly working her way into the social structure here. I think by the time the merge rolls around, she's pretty tight with Amber, and she's kind of not going anywhere. And the other thing is the fall of Mogo Mogo, which I think what happens here is pretty interesting. I would argue Mogo Mogo was the strongest of the three original tribes. And then they absorb the strongest player from Saboga, which is Ethan, who is probably, at least for challenges, like he's definitely a top 5 challenge performer this season, probably like 3. Well, sorry, not this season. It's in Survivor. Of the people who are on this cast, he is a top 5 challenge performer from his original season. But they just can't fucking win again after this. I mean, they lose 4 of the next 5 challenges. They lose all 5 of the post-dissolvement immunities. Lexi kind of builds this really strong alliance, starts cannibalizing. He makes some mistakes, in my opinion. And it kind of works out nice that, we have Colby. I don't love that Colby's on season 50, but we'll talk about all the Mogo Mogo woes during the Colby video because he definitely has a part to play in all that. But this is going to culminate in the swap at the final 10. And I put swap in quotations because there are 6 people on Chapera. There's 4 people on Mogo Mogo. And so we are going to randomly draw for 2 brand new tribes of 5. And just by chance, all 4 Mogo Mogos are swapped to Chapera. And so there's going to be 1 Chapera staying and the rest swapping to Mogo Mogo. And that one person staying is Amber. And the new Chapera loses the next immunity. And it's made up of all the former Mogo Mogo. So when I was talking about the challenge stats, I just included them all as a Mogo Mogo thing. But and we get one of the most famous lines in Survivor history is uttered by Boston Rob to Lex after this mini challenge, where he says, "If you take care of her, I'll take care of you. If you can, if you can." And they're real friends outside the game, Rob and Lex. And after a ton of kind of toiling around and being lobbied, Lex and I think Kathy is pretty responsible for this as well. I do really like Kathy as a player, but if she was opposed to this, she did not fight very hard for it. But they're going to keep Amber and they're going to vote out Jerry. And this eventually leads to the Chapera steamroll, which Rob, he pretty much immediately reneges on the deal with Lex. And Jenna's position at this point, so Lex is voted out the final 9. At the final 8, Kathy's the clear target. And she is pretty much telling everyone that, and I guess by everyone, I mean Rupert, Tom, and like Alicia, I guess, because Sheehan already knows this. She's like, hey, Rob, Amber, and Jenna, they're not going to let anyone else sit in the final 3. And Jenna is included in this. And that's just kind of the point I was making where she does a really good job getting really tight to Amber. And I think she takes a back seat to a lot of the strategy of the season. But I do think it's worth noting that she sees where the power is and she's able to position herself well within that structure. So that is a point in the favor of Jenna as a player. There is a slight hiccup in the Chapera plan when she wins the final 7 immunity. Alicia is voted out pretty promptly there. Then Sheehan is next. And she actually pushes pretty hard to get rid of Jenna as well at the final 6. And so we go into the final 5 with Jenna and Rupert. They're finally considering a move at the final 5. And the current situation is Rob and Amber have a final 4 with Rupert and Jenna. That was their original deal when Rupert and Jenna first got to Chapera. They also have a final 3 with Big Tom. And so I think he kind of sees there being no point in flipping. So I think that's why no moves were really made, is that everybody kind of has this promise of at least a final 4 with Rob. And you're just not going to jeopardize that at the final 9 or 8 or 7, at least at this point in Survivor history. So there actually is a point in this episode where Tom and Rupert are kind of putting the pieces together. And I think it's one of the best moves that Rob makes this entire season, which is to pretty much just pit Rupert and Tom against each other. And it's just, for the sake of being like kind of a dickhead, it's just 2 guys that aren't that smart, that are like, they're finally putting the pieces together. And then Rob comes in without them looking and kind of pulls the card away, and the whole house of cards falls. And they both kind of look at each other like, what the fuck did you just do? What's wrong with you? And really it was Rob all along. And I think that once they both get to the jury and they kind of put the pieces together, at least for Tom, it's a big deal. But anyway, Tom is going to get voted out at the final 5. Jenna is actually the backup plan on this vote as well. And I think that this kind of speaks to like how little agency she does have at this point. I mean, she's been the backup on multiple votes. We never really see anything from her perspective. Like, she's kind of just in the background in the post merge, um, which is interesting because of kind of uh, the opportunities that she had at the Final Four, which is where I think she makes her biggest mistake. So Amber wins this immunity, and Rob and Amber are going to vote for Rupert, and Rupert's voting for Rob. And Rob and Amber pretty much tell Jenna, like, hey, you can't beat Rupert. Just vote out Rupert. Um, and so, like, Jenna, she might be drawing dead regardless, but she still definitely should vote for Rob because, so I don't know if fire making was the tiebreaker at this point. I think this is between when we get the last tiebreaker before All Stars. I don't think there's another one until Steph and Bobby John making fire in Palau. So I might be wrong about that, but regardless, if Rob wins the tiebreaker, nothing changes, right? It's not like either of them would bring Jenna instead of each other. Like Jenna is still getting third if Rob wins a tiebreaker. And I guess she, at this point, she doesn't know she's going to lose that final three immunity, but you're giving yourself pretty low odds. If Rupert knocks out Rob, Jenna is now pretty much guaranteed a spot in the final two. Yes, Rupert probably smokes her in the final two. But I think she has a really good chance against Amber, actually. I think Amber would never take Rupert. And I think Rupert would probably take Jenna over Amber. So, like, it's clear how pissed everyone was at Rob and Amber. And so I think Jenna, she probably cost herself $100,000. She might have even cost herself $1 million by just simply voting out Rupert. And the other thing about the tiebreaker, too, that is worth mentioning is I know there's early iterations of the tiebreaker, like in Marquesas at the Final Four, there is a tiebreaker, and Pascal is eliminated, and he's not one of the people who got votes, and it's because of the rock draw. And I don't know at what point they got rid of the rock draw in terms of fire, or in favor of fire. So I do think that's worth it. By voting for Rob, Jenna may have been jeopardizing her own life in the game. And I think she might say, I have a chance at that Final Three challenge against Rob and Amber, and I'm just going to press my luck with that. It's a slim chance. Like, Rob was so dominant in the challenges this season, and Amber even got a couple. Like, it's just not great strategy. It's not really maximizing your options, in my opinion. So, the final three, hands on a heart idol, is the challenge. And Jenna's foot accidentally comes off the peg, kind of goes up and down off the peg, and she is out. She's the first person on the challenge. And she kind of disputes this result, her foot coming up, all the way kind of until Tribal Council. Jeff is like, hey, Jenna, what happened? And she's like, I don't know. You said my foot came off. And he's like, yeah, it was pretty subtle. And he's like kind of smiling as in like it was so obvious that like Jenna just stop it. And there is a bit of a conspiracy theory about this. This is my second conspiracy theory I'm kind of getting into here. But they only show one like ultra zoomed in shot this entire challenge, and it's Jenna's foot. And people have said that they pretty much gaslit Jenna into stepping off, and then they remade the kind of close-up scene after the fact. And it is a little bit tinfoil hat, but I don't think I'll ever 100% rule it out. Just like, it is a very weird set of circumstances. And like, why do they show a close-up of this foot? We only see the one foot. Like, I don't know if Jenna has ever come out and been like, that's not my foot because of this and that. Like, I don't know. Footgate. I don't know like how deeply people have investigated this. I think if I was going to give my 100% honest opinion, I think that Jenna moved her foot, but it maybe didn't come off of the peg, but they were like, Jenna, your foot's off. And it kind of just spirals from there. They may have had the best intentions. I also think they probably wanted Rob and Amber to sit there together at the end, or at least if they weren't going to, have one of them vote the other one off at the final three. Like, Rob and Amber both on up, holding their hands on the idol at the end is probably what they wanted. So I will say, I don't think that you're crazy if you believe that Jenna was gaslit into accepting that she'd stepped off of the challenge. But regardless, Rob wins and he votes out Jenna. And she is the final juror of Survivor All Stars. And she does vote for Rob. Um, and she does vote for the losing finalist in both seasons. And I wonder if that's the case for anyone else. I should have researched that before this. Like I think so. Lex votes for Ethan, so he's not there. Kathy, I don't know who Kathy votes for. I think she votes for Vesepia, but she votes for Amber anyway, I believe. Um, I don't think Sheehan's on the jury. Alicia, I don't remember who she voted for in either season. Actually, no, she voted for Amber, so she doesn't count for this. No Sheehan. Tom votes for Amber. Rupert voted for Sandra. So yeah, I think Jenna is the only person at this point in Survivor history to be on the jury twice and vote for the losing finalist both times. So just an interesting little factoid for you there. Um, but the big picture on Jenna here and how it pertains to Survivor 50. So I had Jenna as a 4 out of 10 excitement level when I initially reviewed the Survivor 50 cast with Dave. I think we actually had her at the top of the 4/5 tier because I think she was a 5 for Dave. Um, but I think she might be even lower than a 4 for me at this point, to be honest. Like, I know they wanted somebody from Borneo, and I think that probably tremendously helped her on this cast. And I know they were hunting for Greg. And maybe if we get Greg, then we get Jerry instead of Colby, or I think they were going to do Jerry and Colby at one point. But regardless, I think Greg saying no, or I don't know what the fuck Greg said, but her being the kind of the best Borneo rep um, probably makes a lot of sense, and as to why she was cast. Um, and I think if you look at Borneo, it's a night and day different product from current Survivor, right? It really was a social experiment. The survival aspect mattered. Um, there's more arguments. There's really less strategy, or at least less complex strategy. Um, and to be honest, I don't know that Jenna did anything on Borneo to really warrant me thinking that she deserved another shot. Like, it's definitely not like Rich, and I would even say people like Rudy and Sue were far ahead of her. Like, Rudy is this 70-something-year-old guy, and he's able to say on literally day one, like, yeah, all these people. I mean, he says it in a more colorful, Rudy way. It's that great confessional where he's just wading in the water with the water kind of up to his chin, and he's just kind of like, yeah, all these people are different from me, and I'm the one that's got to change though, because I'm the one who's different, and I'm the one who's got to fit in. And I think that just shows a kind of natural instinct for the game and for the social aspect of the game to say, "Oh, okay, like I think Jenna, if she was on Tagi and she was like, fuck that, like I'm here to have fun. I'm not doing this alliance bullshit. You guys are working hard. I'm not about it." I don't think she would have conformed. I think she would have got voted out early because, like I said before, she is pretty headstrong, or was at this point. Um, and I just don't really see many great strategic signs from Jenna in Borneo. And like I said, she was fringe for All Stars. I get why she made the cast. Um, but then if you look at All Stars, she had a hot start. Um, but I think she ultimately falls back into this kind of like backseat position. And I wasn't really wowed by any of her moves. Like I said, I think her best move was aligning with Rob and shaking his hand when he offered it, pretty much. Um, and I think her worst move was voting out Rupert, which might have been a game losing decision, or at least I think it cost her like a 75% chance, or a 50% chance. Because we'll say, okay, Rupert and Rob in a tiebreaker, it's 50-50. If Rupert wins, she 100% makes $100,000 at least. And if they can get rid of Rupert, which I can't imagine, I don't know. Rupert, he's great at like the holding his hand above his head challenge, the bucket of water challenge. I don't know how he'd be on Hands at a Hard Idol. I would think that he would get well, I don't know. He might be pretty good at Hands at a Hard Idol, but regardless, like I think she costs herself at least a 50-50 shot at 100 grand by voting out Rupert. Um, and like so, if you look at the Survivor 50 cast, we have two people who debuted in the single digits. We have Jenna and we have Colby, and for me, she's just not that close to the top of the list of people who I'd want from that era. I'm a big Jerry Manthey fan. Um, she played a, I mean, she was one of the icons of early Survivor. I believe Australia is the highest rated season of all time. I think it's at least the highest rated premiere for sure. Um, and Jerry really was like the villain, quote unquote, and really it's just she was the Colby foil. Um, and yeah, she's not great in All Stars, I would say, but she does have some great moments. And then Heroes versus Villains, she plays a great game against a really, really strong group of players. Maybe the best group of players ever assembled. Maybe. I guess Winners at War. But then, yeah, after that, it's pretty high up there. Um, I think Vecepia is another one. She never really got a real look at returning to Survivor. I think it might have been cool to see her. I know Elizabeth Hasplick said no, but I know she was rumored to be kind of deep. Um, and I would even take somebody like Eliza over Jenna for some single digit representation. 'Cause she's still pretty active in the community, although she's an interesting online personality, I think. Um, but all that said, um, I think Jenna on season 50. I don't think she can possibly be seen as a target. I think there is a decent chance that she goes far because it is a social game, and like she's going to be a woman in her late 40s. That's not as big of a weakness as it once was, at least in the tribe phase. And like I know she can go deep on just the social game alone. I do wonder if she's learned anything strategically since Survivor All Stars. Um, but I think that's going to remain to be seen. So Jenna overall, I think I'm not crazy excited to see her back, but taking it at face value, it is cool to have someone from Survivor Borneo, and she's not an egregious no. I think I would maybe just rather see more early people rather than two people from 49 or three people from 48. Like, give me Jerry or Vecepia or something like that in addition to Jenna, right? Then I'd feel a little better about Jenna. If you're saying, like, yeah, this is one of three people or three women from the single digit seasons, then I say, okay, yeah, Jenna Lewis, sure, I'm with it, right? And then I probably feel a little bit better about it. So I think that's where we're going to wrap for today's episode. So Jenna, she's kind of a tough one to start with, just because she wasn't much of a main character or a big personality really in either of her two seasons. I think I ended up talking more about just the origin of Survivor or Boston Rob and the Shapiro Alliance more than I talked about Jenna. But regardless, she was first, had to do it first. So my plan is to do about one of these a week. So next is going to be Colby. We're going to go in sequential order here. I think there are going to be times where I try to put out two in a week. I also might combine some people. Like, I mean, there's three one-time players from David versus Goliath, right? So I might just do like a David versus Goliath episode. But yeah, my plan is one a week, maybe speeding up at times, ultimately just trying to get through all 22 known players before Survivor 49. So then I think between 49 and 50, that's where we'll do all of the ranking videos and ultimately some predictions for Survivor 50. And picking a winner. Maybe I'll find my winner through some of my previous research here. We'll have to see. But yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed this. Hopefully this gets listened to. And if it does, I'll keep making them. So follow the podcast, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube, however you want to listen. If you guys got any comments, hit me up on TikTok, or I believe you can comment on these on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Maybe you have to leave a review to do that. But hey, fucking do that too. Why not? But yeah, if you got any feedback, if I'm a little too like preachy, or you don't care as much about the history, and you'd rather kind of dive into more of the details of the episode, or really any kind of feedback you have, I would love to hear it. I want to make these fun for you guys. Also considering a live streaming aspect to this, if we can kind of get enough people listening regularly, I think we could maybe try that out. So if you think that will be fun, please listen to the recorded version, and then I'm more likely to do that, right? So yeah, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, however you guys are listening right now, thank you for doing so. And feel free to subscribe where you are. Try out one of those other ones. Just bump the numbers up a little bit. It would be greatly appreciated. So thank you guys so much for listening, and we will see you all next time.